Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to this episode of Time for Truth. What are human rights? How do we know what is our right and what isn't our right? Today's show is going to be very interesting. And we have a global humanitarian with us, Noella Nsamwa. Noella has a master's in leadership and a degree in international relations from Duquesne University. She directs cultural diplomacy consultancy for Kolwezi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Ms. Nsamwa is an international event producer at the United Nations headquarters in New York City, and I have been able to participate in many of her events. She initiated and successfully organized 2 cultural festivals in El Salvador, Central America, in collaboration with the City Hall of Pachimalco. The purpose of these festivals were to introduce Salvadorians to African culture and enable entrepreneurial investment opportunities. This served to reconnect the nations with their ancestral past and their cultural identities. Noella has facilitated an active diplomacy between Kolwezi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Pachimalco of El Salvador, creating them as sister city partnership between the 2 cities. And today, it's our pleasure on A Time for Truth to welcome International Humanitarian Miss Noella Nsamwa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard. That was quite an introduction, and I'm very grateful for that. It's a pleasure for me to be on this platform today to talk about human rights and also to talk about the work we've done together. You know, it's important that we focus on why human rights are important, and they are important because we are human, and for the fact that we're human, there are certain rights that everyone must know, and we need to start implementing them. So thank you so much for having me on this show, and I'm ready to discuss and to talk about how we move from here.
It's a pleasure to have you, Noella. And I know the first thing that our viewers would benefit from is if you told them a little bit of what is it that inspired you to do the work that you do?
Yeah. So my inspiration actually comes from my identity. You know, identity is a huge part of who we are, what we do. You know, when you know who you are, where you come from, it affects how you portray yourself and how you conduct yourself. So if I go back in my background, I was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I moved here to the US, and living here in the US, I was able to see the differences between life in the Congo and here in the US, having so many opportunities here. And back home, where you have kids who are not able to go to school, you have kids who are suffering and dying from hunger. So that drive me into finding what can we take from here, all these opportunities, and share them with those who do not have. So that's where my inspiration came about.
You know, it makes total sense what you were saying, because when you look at the abundance that we have here in the United States of America, and we look at how much is available to us, it almost becomes a responsibility of ours to help our fellow man. Because, you know, we could be on that point. It could be us in that other situation. And it's always good to realize that the best way to keep things moving forward is to take care of things. So what I was going to ask you, because I know you do a lot between countries, is what do you see are some of the problems with human rights issues internationally?
I think it's more about leadership and also recognizing where humanitarian work are needed and how that humanitarian work is going to be done. So if we look at, for instance, actually with the Foundation for Drug-Free World, we went to Haiti. Dr. Ben, you were there, and the work that we were able to do there was a need. So, but for that need to be met properly, we need to understand the culture of the people. We need to understand the identity of the people, so that the needs, the work that we are bringing there, the response that we are bringing to them can be effective. So I think one of the one of the problem that we can encounter into bringing help to people who actually need it is first to understand who are they and how are they going to receive what we are bringing to them. Otherwise, it will be like as if we are the work that we're doing, it's not going to have so much impact. So if the people can receive it the way that they need to receive it, then we say we have succeeded. So understanding who the people are, the culture of the people, identity, and that comes with leadership, both with organizations that are going on the ground, with local leaders that they are encountering in those areas where we are doing the work. So it's important.
Absolutely. You know, you are very involved in the United Nations and did a number of events that you organized. So I wanted you to tell the viewers a little bit about, you know, why you organized them, what your purposes were, and what you wanted to accomplish.
Yes. So the main thing that I don't want to say because when we do an event and it becomes a success, it's a group that's doing it. Even if I'm up in the front. So the main reason to for me to have done all those events is to be able to bring cultures together. So I always focus on culture, our differences. My motto is our differences is our unity. So where we see, instead of having differences to divide us, we need to find those differences and make them and find a way for those differences to make us strong. It's like I speak French, you speak Spanish. It's like how can we exchange on that? And that's beautiful. You're able to speak Spanish. I'm able to speak French. I can catch up on what you're saying. You can catch up on what I'm saying. You can learn my culture. I can learn your culture. And by coming together, we can help each other better. And going back to human rights and humanitarian work, when we are together, we understand each other and we love each other, we embrace our differences, then we help each other better. So the main thing about doing an event at the United Nations is to be able to bridge the gap between cultures. And we did that with El Salvador and Congo. So hopefully we'll be going to other countries.
Very well said. You know, when you look at it and you look at our planet as kind of like a spaceship going through space, and we have all the inhabitants of the earth, And you realize that there are people in Africa right at this moment starving,
Yes.
who don't have water, who have very poor conditions. And you go, why? You know, you go to a short distance in the Caribbean to Haiti, and you see the conditions in a country very close to our country, which has so much abundance. And you realize that these human rights that you know, we need to somehow, like you said, interrelate. There's a video that I think would be appropriate to play. And if the engineer, Buddha, if you could put on the video right now, I think it would really be very good for our viewers. Let's start that video.
Human rights is, geez, that's a good question.
Human rights. Oh, that's a tough one.
Wow.
I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Any right that I think any, just as a normal, you know, human, any...
The rights that humans have.
Oh, that's a very large debate.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Non saprei, è una domanda complicatissima.
Yes, we just take them for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live.
Equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, well, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided to change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. They documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. They noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights of the people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them, and America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded, but the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe. But only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. And never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. But what were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus, the natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So, in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed. And it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. Except for one little problem. If people have the right to food and shelter, why are 16,000 children dying of starvation every day? 1 every 5 seconds. If people have freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers. Free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent. Who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, and to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
Well, there we have it, that man's dream for so long, what he's been fighting for, all cultures, all religions, all races, and in the United Nations, Noella, where you've done all your work. So I wanted to ask you, what were your views on what you just saw?
It came out very strong, you know. I like the last part where it says if human rights are not respected in one area, then they're not respected in all places. You know, it's something very strong. It's a call to who we are as humans. It's a call to our consciousness. It's a call to our view of the world, what we're projecting. Something very strong.
You know, when we when we look at today's world and we look at human rights and we realize that who is going to uphold these rights really comes down to all of us. It's not going to be one person sitting up at a podium who's going to get human rights to become a reality. What I want to ask you, Noella, because I know you've done so much work over the years on this, as we come to near the end of the show, what statement would you like to make to the viewers as to what you feel is important, what needs to happen?
I think what needs to happen is for people to be able to have the information. As we saw in the video, when you're asking people what are human rights, sometimes it's difficult to define, and some people do not even know the 30 universal human rights that we should know. Some people do not know that. So it's like people need to have access to information. We need to be able to go to places and tell them, here are your universal human rights. You know, here's what you can actually fight for. And if we are coming to you to bring you this help, maybe to provide you with food because your town was in an earthquake, because you have the right to eat, you have the right to live. So people need to be able to know that. And I think if I can share a little bit as we're coming to the end of the show, what I did in the Congo, because I just spent 4 months in the Congo, we put together an organization where we're going to be able to teach the youth what their rights are in the Congo. So instead of them just start asking, but we are equipping them to how they can be able to help themselves. They have tools, and they have some things that they're doing. Some of them are transforming, some of them are making soap, some of them are into agriculture. So we are putting all them together, and for them to be able to share their knowledge with others so that they can start growing. Instead of doing things individually, now they can be able to do it in a community or in an association. And that's part of us being human. You know, we have to be able to share what we have. But for you to share what we have, you have to have access to the right information to be equipped the right way. And that's the same thing we do with the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, Dr. Bernard. People need to have the information. They need to be able to know, where can I go get help? They need to be able to know using drugs, it's not good. And here are the consequences that's going to come after. So people need to have information. We need to be able to take the information to them.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that we need to realize is that one of our rights really, which maybe we didn't think of, is to help each other. And why? Yeah. Because really when you look at life is a group endeavor. Someone is making lights, someone is growing food, someone is making areas safe for us, someone is cleaning the water, somebody is being a teacher, a minister, a rabbi. So we all need to take a look and see how we can help each other and apply the human rights. I urge you to go online and check that out for yourself and do the courses that are available to you. Noella, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bernard. I appreciate that. I appreciate this opportunity. It's great. Thank you. I'm very grateful.
It's a pleasure to have you. Your smile always lights everything up. And for those of you watching, learn your human rights, apply them. Let's make this a better world. Let's do that tonight. And from all of us at A Time for Truth, may you have a great weekend. And we will see you on Monday on the next episode of A Time for Truth.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet